Thank you, Kathy. Good evening to viewers. At the height of the pandemic, many stressed and financially strained consumers wanted to access a portion of their retirement savings to help tide them over the difficult time. But until recently, that was not possible. But now a new proposal has been introduced by the National Treasury that could make accessing funds a possibility. Joining us now to unpack this is Blessing Utete from Old Mutual Corporate Consultants. Blessing, thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's start there. We know that for the last 2 years, consumers have been desperate to access any money that they can when at the height of the pandemic, they were losing jobs, they were having their debts recalled, all sorts of matter of negative impacts of the pandemic. Now this new legislation that could help, right?
Yeah, good evening, Kovano. Yes, it certainly could help in terms of allowing employees and members of retirement funds to access certain amounts in their retirement funds. So the proposal from National Treasury that's just come out suggests an environment in which we have two pots being created in the retirement savings. The one pot is going to be called the savings pot, and that pot is going to allow members of funds to access that pot as and when they need it. So when they are in financial distress, as we saw during the height of COVID, in the future, they will be able to access some money from their retirement savings from that access pot. But I think importantly, this comes with the provision that 2/3 is then put in a retirement pot, which you cannot access until you get to retirement. So I think that's one of the benefits from a retirement savings perspective that we are seeing, that this environment, this new legislation is trying to ensure that we have preservation of assets until people get to retirement.
And I mean, that's a very important point that you raised there, that we're looking for preservation of retirement assets, because often people would resign and then take all of the money that's left in their provident or retirement funds and use that to pay off some of their debts. So this way, you are still protected while being able to still save for retirement, right?
Yes, so that's the intention. And I think it was quite a difficult balancing issue that the National Treasury had to do. On one hand, they had to try and find a way to alleviate some of the financial distress that members and employees went into. On the other hand, they had to ensure that the industry still actually improves outcomes for members when they get to retirement. Because unfortunately, as you say, the current environment allows people to access their money when they resign. And in most cases, people have accessed that money and used it for other means. It just meant that at the time when they get to retirement, they haven't got that much saved up for retirement, which means that they actually don't have sufficient means in retirement.
The new legislation is still obviously in discussion, and the public are being asked now to comment on it. But an interesting point that I found in at least what the National Treasury has released is that access to that money is not immediate. So if the bill is to pass as it stands, it doesn't mean that people can immediately run to their retirement funds and get that money.
Yes, so the draft suggests that an effective date of 1 March 2023, but we're all starting off a clean slate from that date. So from that date, you start contributing, you can contribute up to 1/3 of your contributions into this access pot, and 2/3 going to the retirement pot. So it will take time for people to accumulate meaningful sums in these access pots for them to actually make a meaningful, dent to anything that they want to use it for, if they need it for an emergency, for example.
Why would somebody take an action like that? I mean, why not just make the money immediate? If, let's say, you've been saving for the last 10 years and you have 100 or 200,000 available, and then suddenly this 1/3 lets you take out the 20 or 30,000 odd rand, why not just make it available immediately?
I think that's one of the challenges that we've had in the industry for ages. It's the fact that when people have resigned, they've taken this money and used it. So in that environment, we actually are going to see people have improved outcomes, because they're actually now going to be able to get a retirement benefit that's much better than what they would have had they been resigning and taking their money. So, in fact, the part of the draft says that there will be no seeding of money from your old retirement savings. So at that 1st of March 2023, for example, if that's the date that this starts, there will not be seeding of money from your old assets. Importantly also is that there shouldn't be any panic regarding this from members that think that some rights of theirs are being taken away, because your money up to the date when this legislation is passed, you can still access it when you resign. So anything that you have saved up to that date, if you then resign and you still need to take it, you can take it. But I guess the reality is we should all appreciate that this is long-term money. It is money that should be saved for retirement savings and actually only be used for your purposes of retirement and nothing else.
Blessing, do we know if there's going to be any kind of differentiation between private retirement fund investing and those that benefit from some public investing, like people who work for government, for example, who may or may not have access to a similar setup?
So at the moment, the drafts covers the funds that are covered in the Pension Funds Act, which really are pension, provident, and retirement annuity and preservation funds that are covered in the Pension Funds Act. The draft at the moment is silent around public sector funds such as the government employees pension fund. It also doesn't give details around what happens to people in defined benefit arrangements, for example.
So, I mean, okay, I guess that's then going to be the part that's up for consideration or discussion, and those will be the considerations that people put in. But I'm curious because South Africans generally have quite a low savings rate, and we see that with how many people look towards social support when they retire for government pensions and etc. Do you think this will have any impact on how people view long-term saving and retirement?
I think it certainly does, because I think that the fact that we are in an environment where, as you say, people are not, they don't save enough. We are going to see an environment where people cannot access this money into the future that's sitting in the retirement pot. So from that perspective and from an industry perspective, we see that the outcomes of members will actually be much better in this new environment if it's promulgated. So there is going to be an improvement. I think also, we do have to look at the issue of members just being more financially aware regarding emergency savings. As you say, we're not a nation that's known for big saving, and so we haven't. And what happened through COVID just elevated the need for people to have emergency savings on the side. This is going to start, but it's going to take time for people to get assets in these savings pots onwards. But I think proper financial planning and proper financial advice is important, so that you always have some sort of emergency savings when things come about your way.
Going back to this idea of having a bit of a savings pocket, if we call it that, something similar to that in your retirement savings, in your long-term retirement savings, do you think that there'll be some different kind of modalities to that? Will there be a different interest rate that's applied to that perhaps? Or is that something that's still going to be discussed by the likes of Old Mutual and other providers in the long run?
Yeah, so in terms of the investment strategies that are there, so at the moment, yes, it's all long-term money and it's invested in that manner. But one could see a world in which maybe some investment strategies are structured along the pots that are there, and to the extent that members may also have some investment choice available to them. Members may be able to make different choices on the different pots that they have in the retirement savings. So I think we'll see a lot of development in terms of the products that are out there for people to actually cater for their needs. If someone knows that they're going to be accessing this money in the short term, then maybe they don't need a volatile investment structure. As opposed to some money that's going to be sitting there for much longer, which sits in the retirement pot, where you actually can invest and get some meaningful growth on those assets. So those modalities are still going to come through. I think the one other element is around tax. So the tax has been differentiated. If you do access money in the savings pot, you are going to pay tax at your marginal rate of tax, which is different from the current environment that does give a slightly better tax arrangement if you resign from your retirement savings. So that's one of the things that is being put in place, maybe as a disincentive. So people really have to think twice if you're going to take money out of the savings pot, because it's going to be taxed at a much higher rate. But also remember that at the time when you get to retirement, you will need some access to a cash lump sum. If you use up all the money in your savings pot, you actually don't have a lump sum the cash amount that you can take at the time that you retire. So a lot of things are going to have to be looked at in terms of when more details come out and how the various retirement funds actually structure their funds to cater for this new environment.
Yeah, okay. Blessing Utete, thank you so much for that clarity on this latest development there, the head or the managing executive at Old Mutual, just helping us understand this new suggestion of having a two-pot system where you may have a lifeline extended to you through your retirement savings.